I'm glad you guys are here. We are late. I apologize, especially if you're watching online. We have had some technical difficulties this morning.
No,
not really, but we're just late.
Yeah. We were chatting.
We were chatting. That never happens at our family church. So, anyway, if you're watching this morning or you're watching later on in the week, hey, welcome. Glad you're here. Get a treat today. So, part of the teaching team, Shai, is speaking this morning. So, I'm really excited about her topic. We're in the middle of a sermon series called Awkward Things, awkward conversations you have when you're a Christian. So, that'll be kind of cool. So, anyway, we're going to pray and get rolling, I guess. Announcements. Next week, Busick State Park, we're going to have our service at the park, and then we're going to go for a hike. Anybody who wants to hike? It is going to be hot. Yes, sir.
No, I want to go.
Okay, good. All right. Busick State Park is about 16 miles south of
Ozark, yeah. Maybe not even that far.
We'll get you directions.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
really
cool.
simple to find. It's right off the highway, so. Right off
Contact
Highway
us if you
65.
don't know where you're going, and we'll make sure you can get
Oh,
where.
definitely. Or maybe if you need a ride, let us know. We can carpool or
we can
whatever.
carpool,
down there.
absolutely. You're stuck there until we leave, if you carpool with us. But
Right. So,
I
10
know
o'clock.
I know it's closed because I've heard of that town Ozark, so I know we're closed.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's between here and Branson.
Oh, okay.
So 10 o'clock next Sunday we'll be at Busick State Park and have a little music and the word. Brian's actually speaking next week. I'm excited about that one. And then we'll go for a hike. We still haven't decided, depending on who's going, whether we take the hard trail or the easy trail. So
I'll try to remember my inhaler.
you might want to take that and some
Yeah.
comfy shoes
And some
and
water.
shorts because it's going to be like 7,000 degrees out.
Wow.
Maybe not quite that.
Also, women's retreat for the fall has been set. Look online, there is on our family church Facebook and on Connect, there are dates, I believe, or yeah, anyway, it's around, but it's
October is all I remember.
16, 17, 18, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, October, that middle October date, like 16, 17, 18, I think. Also, I think we can talk about it more, but Megan and Alex
Oh, yeah.
would really appreciate some food. So
Anybody who's willing, they've been, so Megan and Alex used to be our youth pastors, and his wife, and they just had a preemie not long ago, 2 months.
he's about two and a
Yeah.
half months
And
old.
pretty much they get off work, go to the hospital, sit at the hospital till about 10 o'clock and go home. They don't have time to really cook. And so anybody who'd be willing to sign up for food stuff, or if you just want to throw cash at it, that's fine too.
We have
but-
a cash idea to use Eat Fit Go, so
Yeah.
that they can order meals and they're sealed and they can just eat them out, or we can cook for them some.
Mhm.
But either way, they're eating fast food every night on
Yeah.
the way home, and most fast food joints aren't even open at 10 o'clock now. And they said they can't eat before they go. They just can't put food on their stomachs before they find out how he's done that day. So
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to we'll jump in. They actually pastor in Bolivar, which is a town 45 miles north of here now. They're senior pastors up there. So anyway, so we'll take care of that. So anybody's willing, see me afterwards or whatever. Don't forget men's group Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. The address is online, but it's at Brad and Tabitha's house. And the women meeting there this week, or where are they meeting? Do we know yet?
no.
Okay, so go to ourfamilychurch.churchtrack.org. Com.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe Joel put it in the link too.
I'm sure Adam is already monitoring.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
Adam's
so
monitoring. Adam
Our
is-
youth pastor is out today. He's actually quarantining, so yeah. So, but yeah, go to the link, and then it'll either probably be here or at Brad and Tabitha's house probably. So, and that's at 6:30. The women meet early because they have a lot more to talk about than the guys do. So.
It takes and we still get out after they do.
Yeah. I drive separate. So anyway, I think that's all the announcements today, unless I forgot something. So let's pray and we'll get started. So, Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this morning, and thank you for a chance to get together and worship you and just praise you. Just pray that as we meet, as we gather, that you'll kind of help us to turn off the rest of the world and just kind of focus and look towards you. guide our speech, guide our worship today as we just lift you up in praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, so I was reminded this week when we were in Texarkana, Arkansas / Texarkana, Texas, a couple years ago for our anniversary. We were at a little seafood dive joint there, which was actually pretty good food. But they were having an open mic night, and so we, we're in the back rooms. We were in back there. Really neat musicians, really nice people. I was talking with a guy. I grabbed my guitar out of the trunk and played with him a little bit too. But was talking to a guy, and he said, he said, I don't understand. He said, I tried going to church. This guy's a really good musician, by the way. He said, I tried going to church, and I went a couple weeks, and they said, hey, do you want to play with us? Because somebody there knew him, and he said, yeah. He said, I'd like to. He said, what I found out was, he said, I can go out to a bar and I can play on Friday night, and people are pretty excited because we have a good band, and people get hyped, and people have a good time. He said, then we went to go to church on Sunday morning, and everyone was just like, he said, I don't understand. If you really believe in God, how could you not get more excited about worshiping God than you do about going out to a bar on Saturday night and hearing a band play? And a conversation that we had yesterday down in Arkansas just kind of reminded me of that. And I thought, that is so true. Sometimes I come to church, my head's elsewhere. I just like, hey, let's get through this music stuff and get on to I really want to hear what's preaching. And I thought, I just need to relook at how I'm looking at the words. And I'm not talking about you have to be jumping up and excited or anything, but I'm saying, how am I worshiping God, and am I more excited about lifting him up in praise than I am about
Lunch at noon.
and I'll make it real, than the Chiefs Super Bowl win. Being a huge Chiefs fan. So anyway, just throwing that out there. We're gonna sing some songs. I'll be honest with you, when I was putting this set list together this morning, I got done with it and I was like, so our daughter just got engaged yesterday, our middle child, down in Arkansas, and it's our first one to get engaged, gonna be the first one to get married. And when I got done with the set list, I was like, oh, those are all Sam songs. And she's a lot better at singing all of them, but I must have had my head wrapped around it, just thinking about her this morning. And
Congrats, Sam.
Yes, congrats to Sam. And Trevor. I guess and Trevor.
And Trevor.
I guess.
Yeah. Good kid.
And you'll have to forgive me, I don't usually do this. That's all it. Sorry, I got the wrong song. There you go. That one matters.
Spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed new life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. The wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Amen. Isn't he pretty awesome that way? Yeah. Fights for us even when we, I don't know, don't deserve it. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song. how to reminisce today. First time we went down and visited College of the Ozarks with Sam.
Got top ladder.
What's that?
Top ladder.
Oh, we went to a baseball game at college there, and that song, one of the kids who she said was pretty cute, that was his walk-up song. So, and it was the first time we heard it, and we were like, Sam, you gotta learn this song. So, anyway, we did. Letting go of every single dream, I lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I've tried to win this war, I confess. My hands are weary, I need your rest. Mighty warrior, king of the fight. No matter what I face, you're by my side. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings. There's not a day that you have not seen. So in all things, be my life and breath. I want what you want more than nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I needed you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. You are my strength and comfort. You are my steady hand. You are the firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good. There's not a place where I'll go you have not already stood. When you don't move the mountains, I needed you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. When you don't I will trust in you. Heavenly Father, we do just trust in you, and even when we don't have all the answers, you've gone before us already and created a way, created a plan, and we know that sometimes you don't share them with us until we need to know, and we understand that. Lord, this morning, I just pray for our community this morning, Lord, as we try to decide what we're doing with all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world. Lord, I just pray that you would be center of that. And I pray for individuals, I'm not going to bring up their names, who are suffering from health issues this morning. I just pray that you would touch them and just heal them, Lord, today as we speak, as we lift your name up. Lord, I pray for our nation, our country, Lord, that seems to be drifting away from you, and I pray that there would be revival and we would come back, Lord. I pray for Shai this morning as she brings us your word, Lord. It's an awkward topic, and so I pray that you would give her the words and give her the strength and the knowledge to speak for you on that subject, Lord. And I just thank you again for this morning and for the beautiful weather that you've given us and a chance to get together today and worship you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, well, awesome. I'm pretty excited about Shai coming to talk to us about genetic engineering.
Okay, we are having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
One of them is that thing will not stay on.
Huh.
Oh, fine.
Well, it's a good thing that we don't need it.
Well,
other than,
but here's the other thing.
yeah,
My phone has disconnected,
okay.
and
We
it
may or may
is
not be online.
focused on the TV,
And so
and I can't move it.
Would you like to use my phone?
Well, I can't connect to it while it's still live
well, it's still connected. Okay.
So it is still running,
Okay.
and unless Adam texts me and
Mhm.
tells me different, I do believe we are still
We're
running.
still-
so
we're still running,
my
okay.
question is, do we stop and restart for the sermon so I can actually put Shai on?
Shai doesn't need to be on.
Yeah, but-
Shai doesn't need to be seen.
But here's the thing. How fun is it to sit there and look at what's now a flashing awkward things thing?
Okay.
Theme is on point.
And
Yeah.
and listen to a voice when you're wanting to watch a video, you know? Who wants?
I must be.
So how's everybody's week? We haven't notched our wins
Oh yeah,
yet.
let's
We
do
have
that
not
thing.
notched
We
our
have not
wins.
notched our wins. So what we're doing is we try to notch our wins, but basically it's testimony is what it basically is, what God's done for us, and we kind of share that with each other.
Adam says you can move cam.
What?
Adam says you can just move the cam.
Oh, that would make
Oh,
sense. We
yeah.
just move the camera to Shai.
Okay, so Adam,
Makes way too much
you
sense.
have to tell me when I'm on Shai,
Oh.
Yes, sir.
because I won't know. I can't see. Oh wait, somebody pull it up and tell me.
Oh, you have to do that.
Yeah. I don't have
Where are we at?
Well, it's on YouTube also.
Oh yeah. So I do have
So sorry, guys. I have a Not Your Wins. So no. I
Oh,
can't
it's
see.
moving.
Oh wait, somebody pull it up.
Oh,
Can you show me?
yeah.
Hi, that's me.
This is the nice part about house church. You just never know what's going to happen.
So sorry, guys.
We have intermission in the middle to
So.
adjust the camera.
Oh, the windows is good, clear picture of the window.
Can you show me?
She's currently at bottom right now.
This is the nice part about if you just come down just a little bit, you'll be fine.
Well, I did.
Oh.
I have to wait till it catches up.
Right, because it's got a 30-second delay.
Yes.
Well, we got Shai in there, so it's okay.
Hi.
But we'll try not to have just your chin and up.
That's fine too.
We need
Minimal
to
means
advertise
great.
our
Okay,
family
so I need to go down
church
a
shirt
little bit.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go down just a little bit, you'll be fine.
Just in case you didn't realize what church you were at is our family
Just in
church.
case.
Alright, so anybody have any wins?
Okay, I was, things have been stressful at work, and I'll just leave it at that. And I just really noticed this week God prompting me a lot and giving me prompts to those songs, or to turn on this radio station, or to take a deep breath, or whatever, to help me get through and to calm down and to chill between clients and stuff. So it was just, I just really felt God's presence this week.
That's awesome.
Play with it while somebody else goes.
Yay, God.
Yeah, got it, alright.
I don't know. So it's really not that big a deal, but I got to see the family I hadn't seen in 8 years. And we got to kind of go over things that wasn't really gone over last time we were meeting, because so my previous stepmom, she said that there were a lot of questions she wanted to ask me, but since I was a teenager last time I saw her, she felt like it might have been a little too much. And so we got to have an adult talk.
Nice.
And talk about the things that happened in the past, and then I got to reconnect with my old siblings.
Let's talk about the awkward conversation.
Awkward
That's
conversations!
it.
Yes, exactly.
Alright. Go guys.
That's a big thing.
Yeah. What else we got?
Oh yeah, and I went through the airport without needing my mom's help.
The
The big ones too.
I picked her up at the airport, only an hour early.
I've had a really rough week, but I've gotten out of bed every day.
Alright, yeah, that's
You know,
alright.
those are wins.
Yeah.
For real though.
Alright, well, Shy, without further ado.
So I'm going to be talking about genetic modification and some of the ethical debate that's kind of circulated both the Christian and the secular communities. Okay, so I'm a nerd. For those of you guys that don't know me, I'm a science nerd. So researching this got me really excited, and I'm going to kind of ramble, and I might go a little long. If I start to, or if I annoy you, throw something at me and I'll stop. I promise. So I'm going to try to get it through as fast as I can and as clear as I can without going off on too many tangents. But genetic modification in of itself is actually a really new development in science, and really only got off the ground in 1972, and that's super new. And that was when recombinant DNA was found to be effective, to be transferred into bacteria. I think they did that first in E. coli. And it was discovered that it could be it would function normally, and it would replicate, and it would be maintained within that organism. So that was a really cool thing. And scientists were like, hey, that could be really dangerous if we get too far down this rabbit hole. So they ceased all research on this until they were able to come together and come up with some guidelines and some codes that could regulate this and make sure that nobody went too far with research that could potentially change the course of the world. And make sure that this methodology was used properly. These guidelines are still used today. They're still in place. They have been adapted over time just based off of the new research and the new information that they've gathered to be able to determine, okay, this is information that's...
This is an awkward thing.
This is awkward.
Let's turn
Okay.
that. There you go.
Just to make sure that it's something that needs to be recognized in those guidelines, like maybe it's not as relevant as they thought that it would be, or maybe something they came across was like, oh no, that needs to be added. So they have been adapted, but they're still in place today, so that's kind of cool. But very quickly, researchers developed new ways to use this, and I think the first thing that they were able to commercialize was human insulin. And I think in like scientific history, that's the fastest that anything has been like commercialized in science once it was discovered. So it's something that they researched, and they researched heavily, and it came to be very productive very quickly. And scientists first reported genetic modification in animals in 1976, and that was well established into the 1980s. But plant genetic modification actually came afterwards, which I found to be a little bit backwards, but that's okay. In 1983. And now we know that actually at least some organisms in every major group, so fungus, bacteria, invertebrate, every major group, we know that at least some of those organisms can be genetically modified. So that's kind of cool too, that we've figured out how broad this topic is. But this in of itself is kind of an interesting ethical thought exercise, because if you could prevent some of these DNA mutations that were kind of more recently looking into in DNA editing. If we can kind of prevent some of these DNA mutations, does that affect God's creation in a way that maybe we should think twice about? So that's kind of where that ethical debate kind of comes from. But because we weren't able to manipulate genetic code when the Bible was written, it's not directly addressed in the Bible. And there are general principles that we can apply. So what I found those to come from primarily was actually Genesis 1:27 through 28. I'll say that again in case you guys want to write it down. It's Genesis 1:27 through 28, where we're told that we are made in God's image, and that we're also given a mandate in that, right? Like we're told that we're made in God's image, but we're not just told, okay, hey, look, you look like God. Cool. We're given a mandate to subdue and take charge of the earth and all that reside on it. And in my research, I kind of came across this phrase that I really liked, which was continuing the spirit of creation by being subordinate creators. And I just really liked that term of subordinate creators, that yes, we are second to God, but he did also create us to also create. So in that mindset, like, yes, we're made in God's image, he's the creator. So not only are we the creation, but we are also creators in of ourselves. And that kind of hit me pretty hard, because that's kind of what I want to do. I'm in the science field. I want to advance research and be able to make sure that humankind is advanced as well. So we use the word to kind of dive into that a little bit, and we kind of dive into the curiosity, which is it's kind of to find out more about the world around us, to be able to use the ingenuity and the wisdom to put that knowledge to use, and God gives us those tools to do that. The argument has never really been whether we should use genetic modification. It's been how we should use it, and that's been both in the scientific community and in the Christian community. It's been very much so like, once it was discovered, it wasn't like, should we use this? It was, okay, how should we use this? So I found that to be kind of curious. It wasn't as big of a debate as I thought that it would be. It's not as awkward as I thought it would be between the Christian community and the secular community. It was very much so both communities are just like, okay, how can we advance this, and how should we use this in the most ethical, which tends to be also the most godlike way. So it's not exactly argued between those two communities. I'll kind of touch on it a little bit later, but I found that it's more debated within one's own self. It's more an internal debate that one needs to have, which I guess is also awkward, just not necessarily the two sides contradicting each other. But it's also never really been debated between secular and Christian communities that mankind has dominion over the earth and all that's on it. And therefore, it's not heavily debated that exercising that dominion includes fighting against death, which oftentimes is caused by disease, which a lot of our current genetic modification research is going towards ending diseases or DNA editing and kind of splicing some of those DNA strands to be able to pull out the disease and be able to put something else back in to make that individual healthy. But this also extends to the idea of food production for sustaining life, like I mentioned, fighting diseases, etc. And as this acts within our mandate that God has given us, it can also be assumed that the ingenuity, the resources necessary for doing this is also God-given. So again, it's never really been argued that genetic modification wasn't God-given. It's always just kind of been assumed because it fits into our mandate. So I was actually not able to find much that was Christianity going against genetic modification like I thought that it would be. So that was interesting. But let's see if I can find it. The ethical dilemmas that I found were when people think to use the technology to create like a master race, which is I think the extreme that we always think of when we think of genetic modification, or we think of like designer babies, like I want my baby to have blonde hair and blue eyes because I think that's pretty, or I want my baby to have tan skin, I want my baby to look like this. That's not what they're researching right now. Nobody's super concerned about that right now. But that is an ethical dilemma that was put into those guidelines as well. That's not something that they're going to be looking at if they follow those guidelines, and they continue to do so. But I think currently a big debate, primarily amongst the secular community, it seems like, is the idea of GMOs in food production. So if you guys hear a lot of the no GMOs, or you see those labels that say no GMOs, a lot of that is coming from this pushback that's actually fairly recent, and it's growing in America, that they don't want those GMOs in the food because they think that they're dangerous. But really, the only research that I've been able to find on it, or the only argument against GMOs that I've been able to find, just came from just, I guess, a distrust of science that was stemming from postmodernism. But GMOs really do make up a large percentage of our crops. I think, for example, oh man, I don't remember the exact percentages for each crop, so I'm not going to share them because I don't want to say the wrong information. But you guys can look it up. But they do make up a very, very large percentage of our crops, which is necessary to feed our nation and to feed the world. So personally, I'm pro-GMO, but I do urge everybody to kind of do their own research on that. That's just my thing.
Just out of curiosity, did you find any research between the amount of people who are allergic to wheat now to GMO production? Because if we look at GMOs, probably didn't even come out till the mid-'80s to late 80s, early 90s. So we've only had a few years of research into that, and now it seems like everyone's allergic to wheat, and almost all wheat is GMO. Did you find any really constructive research on that?
Nothing that is solidified, because it's been such a short amount of time. Nothing can actually be stated that it is the cause of GMOs. It can be this idea, this theory that people continue to test, and that's incredible, and I hope that they do, and if they find that, then absolutely we need to dial that back. But currently, that's a very similar concept to people assuming that even GMOs, or I guess vaccines, which is a genetically modified organism, is the cause of autism. It's a very similar concept of somebody making that assumption and then sharing out research that has not had enough time to be developed, or has not been developed properly. So I hope that they continue that research, but
No,
nothing that I've found has been concrete enough over enough time, because it's so new.
Isn't celiac disease still kind of newer as well? So
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to determine, because these allergies are developing over time regardless. I think that they were starting to increase, and we're seeing a lot of increase in a lot of other things going on, rather than just like food allergies, but a lot of things that could possibly be contributed to GMOs. It could possibly be contributed to the amount of UV that we're exposed to now. It could be any number of things. So yeah, I think that continuing the research over a more extended amount of time is going to help that. I found, some stuff, but nothing that was solidified, nothing that's been able to say, yes, statistically this is what this shows. So, but yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, as of right now, I'm pro GMO. But yeah, do your own research on it. Figure out what that is. Please don't take my word for it. But yeah, a lot of that comes from a distrust of science, which is similar reasoning that I found, like I've already said, against the vaccinations. Vaccinations are a result of genetic modification. Technologies that research in this concept of genetic engineering is the basis of. So this research that we're seeing a lot of right now is the COVID-19 vaccination. So I think just about everybody is pro-GMO right now. They just don't know it. But I think right now everybody is kind of looking to science, and they're not understanding that this is a really, really new science, and that's why it's taking a little bit longer too. I don't know that we've ever really needed to develop a vaccine this quickly before.
And the big question that I see is, how safe can a vaccine be without the years and years and years of testing that every other medication and vaccine is supposed to go under before it's distributed?
I do wonder
That's my biggest fear.
Yeah, I do wonder how these guidelines are going to be adhered to if we're pushing past maybe some of the ethical boundaries. Every research study has to go through an ethical team and has to be approved. And it has to go through all of these steps, and it seems like this research has gone into play much quicker than what we would normally see, and it's necessary, but at the same time you do have to wonder how safe it is or how ethical it is, because we don't know, and it's such new technology that we don't know. So it's going to take a little bit longer than what people are expecting, but it's also going to come a lot faster than what it has in years past. So I think we're in for a real treat, I think, in the scientific community to see what they do and how they handle it. So that's kind of something that we're looking most modernly towards, is that COVID-19 vaccine. But because it is such a hot topic, like I said, I do urge all of you to do the research on your own. I do have a book that I actually just purchased. I say by accident. I bought it on purpose, but I didn't know it would help me. And I got in trouble for buying more books. So I get to say, look, it came in handy. It's useful. So if you guys want to borrow that, that's where I got a lot of my information. Also, apologetic study Bibles oftentimes have a lot of information on topics like this. So, and how science kind of contributes to the Bible, and the Bible kind of contributes to science. So if you guys are interested in that, I do definitely think that everyone should research this, come to your own conclusions, because it is more of that internal debate. Because, for example, like I said, it's less of the science versus Christianity and more of that personal debate. But for example, I used to be very, I guess, opposed to the idea of saying, okay, so this child, this infant is now known to have autism. Okay, if we can cure this, if we can somehow figure this out, and this is not right now in the cards, this is not something that we're actually able to do yet, but if we were able to change that and take that autism away, you just changed that person. Because that person is going to grow up to be somebody else if they have autism versus if they do not. And I don't know if you guys have had a relationship with people that have autism on any form of that spectrum, but I have yet to have a negative experience. Or Down syndrome. I mean, I have some incredible relationships with people with Down syndrome, and while yes, taking that chromosomal condition away could benefit their life, and that could be incredible, but it also changes who they are. So you do have to wonder at what point we're changing God's creation for the better, for His plan. He wants us to do this, or He does not want us to do this because we just changed that person and therefore the course of the world. So it is a really interesting concept to say, okay, this is a really good thing, we should take this disease away, but also like that it should be kind of a thing. So I'm still debating on it, I'm still doing research on it. I used to be very opposed to it, and now I'm leaning towards like, okay, no, but if He wants us to be creators of our own world that He has provided us, and He's provided us these tools, then why shouldn't we? So it's a really cool concept, and I get really into it. So I really cut down. I literally had like a whole typed out thing, and I cut it in half and was like, no. So I have that for later for me to read through. And
it's really, I mean, we've spent hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years fighting disease.
Exactly.
And wanting to help people. So it would be a natural progression to go toward those developmental diseases that happen that actually happen as we're being created. And yeah, at what point are we helping a life, and at what point are we messing with God's plan? Right. Because there are situations, the autistic kids, the Down syndrome kids, the kids with, I mean, those are the two that are probably the easiest to come to mind, but there are millions of different ways that kids are struggling with those developmental disabilities. And those interactions that you have with those kids, they can be life-changing.
Absolutely, it was for me.
And I get it, that whole, what are we doing if we take away that interaction?
I'm curious though, because that line of thought also lends itself to, then are we doing so altering God's plans in using medical things that we cures for cancer, and when you have to be revived, and I think that if you go along that line of thought, it opens itself to a whole lot more than just genetic mutations.
Exactly.
And things that you could do in a genetic code. So I think that's interesting.
Absolutely, and a lot of those come from altering the genetic code of, I mean, the research that goes into cancer research, for example. I mean, we have to genetically modify the organisms that we test that on to be able to give them these conditions that we can test on. So, I mean, even in conditions like that we're researching cancer, we have to look at genetic modification as well and see if even that's ethical. And if not, then we're screwed.
Well, then it also lends itself to some of the conditions that we have, whether that be illness or genetic things. How many of those have we, because of environmental things and man-made things up to this point, made an impact that would have not necessarily caused that, but made that the conditions right for that to yield itself to that.
Exactly.
So I think it opens a whole area of thought that maybe we haven't thought about before.
Exactly.
Well, I think so far shy wins the award for the most awkward conversation as
Yeah.
far as our topics.
Yay!
Because the Bible doesn't give us a clear cut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, because it does say, that, we're supposed to reproduce and we're supposed to take care of the earth. How do you do that? I mean, do you do that because, I grew up in a farming community
Mm-hmm.
that raised a ton of corn. It's Iowa, it raises all corn. And what do?
Sweet Iowa.
You pick a tassel, you combine the tassels, and you create a new species of corn. That's
Mhm.
how Iowa lives, is by detasseling corn. And so, but at the same time, where does the Bible give us
Nope.
anything?
No, from what I found, and I can't remember where it's at, and I should have brought my massive sticky note Bible, but I could have found it.
What? You didn't bring your massive sticky note
I
Bible?
didn't, because I didn't need it today. But I did. I guess I did. But anyway, so there's areas in the Bible that tell us about medicine that they were using at that time, and that God told them to do certain things, or even not to do certain things. I mean, we see in the Old Testament that He tells us not to eat certain meats. He tells us not to wear certain clothes. He tells us not to do all of these things because they weren't healthy. And so now we've modified these organisms to be able to, and maybe not just specifically through plucking a piece of DNA code out and putting something else back in, but through science technologies, we've been able to make these foods healthy. We've been able to make these clothes like wearable and sustainable without causing disease within ourselves. So now we have to wonder, is that still relevant? Which Adam and I have discussed in the past through one of our lessons, that we don't believe that it is. But these concepts of, okay, we're handed this and we're told to do this to keep ourselves healthy, but now we've modified and we've come so far throughout time and history that we have to wonder what's still relevant. So we have to wonder if the medicines that we were given then are the only medicines that we were supposed to use, or if now that we've been given more medicines that we've been able to create and modify to help our current community and our current state, if we're allowed to use that, if we're supposed to use that because it's God-given. So you have to wonder, for example, in my history we've discussed like the autistic kids and the Down syndrome kids and those individuals that have altered our lives. We discussed cancer a little bit. My aunt suffered from cancer for years, and she changed the lives of the physicians around her. She changed my life. She was the one that taught me what the word prayer meant and got me interested in figuring out who God was, because I had no exposure prior to her. So if she had not suffered and not gone through that, would I be a Christian right now? Would I have come to God? Would I be able to have this amazing relationship with Him? Who knows? So you have to wonder, okay, so He put all of these necessary evils in the world, or I suppose we rather did when the fall occurred. But these evils are here, and He allows them to be here because they do have benefits. They do bring people to God. And I mean, we just sang about it. He leaves the 99 to tend to the one. So are we supposed to leave the 99 sick people to tend to the one that may be affected, the me that's affected? Or are we supposed to actually be able to help the masses and raise them up, and will that bring people to God as well? So it's a really interesting internal debate that necessarily is not between the two communities, the two sides that we see, which I don't believe are truly there, the science versus Christianity, the science versus God. I don't believe that wall is there, but we tend to put that there as humans. It's not that debate. The debate is completely, for me at least, internal. So, I find that interesting.
I'm thinking about New Testament things, because obviously you got New Testament, you got Old Testament, some other things. I just wouldn't say changed, but when God lowered the sheet, said, Peter, eat all this stuff because I made it. It's good for you. It's no longer going to kill you because you can't cook it. I'm thinking about in most of the instances of healing, and again, I'm working through this in my head right now because I haven't sat down and done a lot of research on this. Other than
I think you should. It's so fun.
Well,
I did it the other night, and I just sat here just like, oh my gosh.
my problem is I would probably never eat again if I did the research because I don't trust GMOs personally.
No, that's
I
totally
mean,
fine.
I just
That's totally fine.
I don't trust genetic modification.
That's chill.
Yeah.
She's convinced me to be okay
Yeah,
with it.
and then
Please,
I'm not.
please look it
well,
up.
Yeah, no, and I'm not. Again, we can have this debate and be
100%.
friends
The
and whatever. We don't
Absolutely.
have to kill each other over this.
Go.
I know. But I'm thinking of, in most instances where Jesus healed somebody, he either picked up mud and healed them, or he told them to go dip in the water, or he literally used an act of faith as well as an outside source in order to heal these people. And then I'm sitting there going, okay, my mom struggles with mental illness and has her whole entire life, spent years and years and years of my childhood in a mental hospital. If they could have plucked out a gene and put a different gene back in there, I'd be all for it,
Right, right.
and I'm sure she would too. They can't, and they do have medications, but sometimes it works, sometimes it don't.
Exactly.
But anyway, so it's a great awkward conversation to have.
And I like the fact that you're pointing out that this is not a Christian versus secular
Yeah.
view. This is you've given us some different ways of looking at things where we do have to come up with, it doesn't really matter which side you were to take. They both can be taken to the extremes, just like anything. You go back to the biblical moderation thing. They both can be taken to the extremes. If we start healing every genetic difference and calling it an issue, then you get into the whole designer baby thing.
Exactly.
Brown eyes are bad, or brown hair is bad. You get into what is the definition of a developmental disability?
Right.
And so just because we all have different genes, and so how do you pick out? Eventually, it's easy now. We could say, oh, it's that extra 23rd chromosome. It's that whatever. We could pick them out really easy now. But at what point do you get to the point where, oh, now we're going to look at this one?
Or we cure all of those and we say, okay, now some of these environmental diseases that we're seeing, or I don't know, somebody that's more susceptible to getting the common flu. Let's say that Burnett is now connected to, you are more susceptible to getting the common flu, the common cold, whatever. We're going to make sure that my baby's not Burnett, because I don't want them to be more susceptible to that. That's completely an exaggeration. I don't think that's a thing.
Also, I guess I keep thinking, God gave us such personal responsibility. He gave us free choice, and he says, and he gives us some pretty standard guidelines about how we are to be in relationship for him and what he can bless in our relationship, and that all things can be done to his glory, and that he can take all situations and make them where he can have a powerful impact if he's at the center of them. So it really, to me, does come down to where is the person's heart and what do they align with directly, and from there God will take the situation and determine. I guess it just is hitting home the personal responsibility side of it for me.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think probably one of the best things he brought up today is that we need to, as Christians, we need to be doing the research and seeing what exactly is going on. My dad and
No, please make sure it's a peer-reviewed article.
yeah.
Please.
Well, because my dad and I had debates for years about movies. When I grew up, we didn't go to the movie theater. We would watch a movie at home, but we didn't go to a movie theater. That was the thing that he was afraid we'd look bad on God if the pastor was walking into a movie theater. First thing I did when I graduated high school is I went to a movie with my girlfriend. I was getting ready to go leave for the army. I'm like, I'm going to a movie. I went to a movie. It wasn't all that exciting. So anyway, but we had this huge debate, and what I really got out of that was that because he talked about the movies when he was a kid, and somewhere along the lines in the 50s and early 60s, Christians got completely out of the movie industry. They said there's no way we can be part of the movie industry, and there's no way we can go to movies, and so non-Christian people. And so all the movie theaters by the 80s were filled up with non-Christian movies and sex and drugs and cussing, when they could have been filled up with something a little more wholesome. Like we see a lot of great movies come out now. And I think that's kind of one of the things we have to watch as Christians, because I know growing up in the 80s and stuff, you know, we were taught science bad, Christianity good. And it's not necessarily that case. And so what happened was a lot of Christian people stopped looking into what science is doing and can't have a debate with somebody who even remotely knows science. It's just, oh, God says we shouldn't do that. Well, why? You know,
Show me where.
show me where, show me why. And I think that's something we need to look at, is how uninformed are we, and how that looks poorly on God when His people have no clue what they're talking about. And so anyway, that's something that came out of this for me, is that, you know, we need to be careful that we're not just giving science away.
Right, absolutely.
As Christians, but because then who's setting the moral authority? If Christians aren't active in, I know you're active in science and you're an awesome person, but if we're not part of, as Jesus said, be part in the world but not of the world, if we're not out there at least smart enough to have somewhat of a debate, then we're just giving it over to where we could end up with.
It kind of ties in Julie's thing too. If we want to be part of a piece of a voice in the people who write those guidelines, we have to be in there.
In areas where someone's going to talk to us about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to send our we have to be sending our kids to be in the science world, where for so long we didn't. We need our kids. We need to be, as adults, jumping into that, knowing it for one thing, but also encouraging those careers to get in there, so that personal responsibility, that prayer and God's guidance can go into those guidelines, can go into, because we've talked about this before, there are more Christians in the science world than we realize. There are more people who believe in some sort of I can't think of it.
Creationism?
Right, the word where somebody actually created all things. There's a
Creationism?
No, it's there was a power that created everything. There's a term for it, and it's just not in my head.
I'm sure that it's escaping me as well.
Yeah,
So
but there's some sort of omniscience out there. That the deeper people get into science, the more they see it. They see the design.
Yeah.
So we need to be supporting those voices and praying for those people who are on the front lines for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see God in science and science and God, and all of that is one entity for me. So that's a really cool relationship that I get to have with Him, and I have friends in the scientific community that are like, how could you possibly see God in any of this? And I have friends in the Christian community, how could you possibly see science in any of this? And I don't see how anybody cannot see that they're intertwined. So it's a really interesting personal debate within someone's own self and their own relationship with God, whether it exists or not. I mean, you see people that are atheists or agnostic that don't have a relationship with God, they still have to come to their own conclusions as well and figure out what that means ethically to them. And yes, their relationship with God, whether it be, strong or not, existent or not, comes into play with that. So I think if we can keep ourselves informed, keep ourselves in the scientific community, and make sure that we're just kind of present and working towards God and for the world and for humanity, then we're doing what He told us to do. We're providing our own tools and accepting the tools that He has given us to be able to go forth with our mandate that He gave us all those years ago.
I'm sorry. A scripture came to mind.
Go for it.
And we've used it a million times during this series. It's Romans 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, perfect, and pleasing will. Right? I thought that was...
Absolutely.
Then we'll know what we're supposed to do. Keep close to God.
Right. I think that it was a good point that was made earlier, that I think God's going to be able to produce a positive income or an outcome that's his outcome in any situation. So a lot of it comes down to our own personal situations. For example, like maybe a certain sin is it is a sin for somebody else. I may not consider it a sin for myself. I mean, I won't get super into that because that's a whole different awkward conversation. But I don't necessarily know that one sin for someone is also a sin for another, because maybe that desire or that concept, that place of mind is different for each person. And I may be doing something for God, and somebody may be doing that same something, and it distances. Thank you. Distances them from God, and that's a very different outcome. So I think that a lot of that comes down to where we are personally, where we are with our own walk with God.
And wow, the Holy Spirit, alive and well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns.
I think we already derailed it.
Yeah, I did the thing. Nobody threw anything at me. So I do want to say that the Faraday papers are a great place to start with this. If anybody's interested in starting the research or scratching the surface on that, the Faraday papers dive into the ethical side of it, and they bring in both sides. And that book that I mentioned is a conglomeration of those Faraday papers, and the authors kind of come together and discuss some of those ethical debates. They bring the Christian side, the secular side, and they match that together. So Faraday papers, great place to start.
F-A-I-R-D-A-Y.
Couldn't tell you how to spell it.
Okay.
I
Sure, I
spelled
can
it
get
with
close enough.
F-A-R-A-D-A-Y, but
Sure.
sure. But
Say Faraday to Siri, or to Google or Alexa, and I'm sure they'll get the right thing going for you.
Also, when you threw out peer-reviewed journal articles.
Yes.
They are available online. You
Yes.
can search
Scholar.google.com.
Yes, and you can go on social media and hear all kinds of horrible things about just about anything. No matter what topic, you're going to get positives and negatives. You're going to get people for and against. But if you want factual information, we have history of sometimes journal articles, because the articles are reviews of research or reviews of other people's work, kind of conglomerating it all together or whatever. Sometimes they get proven wrong later in
100%,
science.
yeah.
Absolutely. But if you want factual information, that's the best place to go. And just always look for the most recent stuff.
Right, and I would like to say that I struggled before with determining what it is that I bring to the church, or what my passion was, or what I could provide for everybody, so I never filled out one of those cards. But I'll say that if anybody needs help deciphering those journal articles, they can get really messy and really hard to decipher, because they throw in numbers and words that are confusing, and it's impossible to read through, because they're writing it for other scientists. They're not writing it for the common education, which is most human beings. So I will gladly read through those and kind of decipher and show where the holes are, because that's what my training is in, that's what my schooling is in, is determining where are the holes in this, how could it be better, now make it better. So I can help with that. Somebody send me a link to it, or let me know what it is, and I can read through it and figure it out. And again, please don't just 100% take my word for it. I'm not going to be right all the time, or even most of the time.
But you have credentials. What are your credentials in this area? Because that's something you did not share with everybody.
I have a bachelor's degree in biological chemistry, pre-med, and I'm working on my master's in public health, and I'm going for my PhD in epidemiology.
There you go.
That's me. Hi.
So this is something that you are schooled in. This is something
Yes.
that you have trained in.
Yes.
That's what I wanted people to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. Well, good job being awkward.
Oh, thanks. I'm really good at being awkward.
And anybody else? Anything? Cool. Brian, you want to close this
Yeah,
out? Great.
absolutely. Heavenly Father, just thank you for Shai today and just really bringing us a message that opens up our minds along with our hearts, Lord. Lord, just help us to just chew on this topic and get closer to you and how we feel on either side. Lord, help us as we go throughout our week. Help us in our work. Help us in our family lives. And if we are awkward, Lord, just help us work through those situations. In your blessed name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good job.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job.
I'm sorry I started off with all of the like, here are dates and information.